Good morning. This is October 13th. I may be wrong. Let me just repeat again. Yes, today is the November 13th, and I have taken a week off to try to do as much as I can with the organization of thoughts and ideas. I will start to be sharing with all of you. I had made the determination since February this year, after the Chinese New Year, to do more of this kind of a broadcast. And the first phase will be mostly of my narrations and my background and what I am, what my focus is. To be very brief, linguistically, historically, I was born in China, 1948, in Shanghai, with the parent that with multiple dialects. My father is from Yuyao, Zhejiang, which you will hear more about. Zhejiang, Yuyao, which is the home base of the Chinese philosopher Wang Yangming in the 14th century in the Ming Dynasty. So we share a rich heritage in that part of China. 48 Shanghai, and since we have, after the war, we moved into Hong Kong, Macau. I used the 1952 and 62 is the 10 good period of my growing up in the Portuguese colony of Macau, where I got baptized, also in the historical name by the Jesuit group of the mission created by Matteo Ricci. You all shall see in the future how much of that name and the person had influenced of the work that I do, in part or in whole. So I left Shanghai aware of 5 different tongues. My father is a French graduate from the Sorbonne, and the inter-household from now Shanghai to Macau and our future migration into Brazil. In these 3 areas of geographic territories, but the linguistic and the sound and hearing, and I think this will be of good influence to many research about the tonality, how youngsters can learn multiple languages because the exposure of the different sound and tones. But first of all, the 10 years in Macau, I was also very much engaged with another group of Italian religious group in the Salesians, known also to be Don Bosco or John Bosco or Giovanni Bosco. So the schooling in Macau, with the exposure into the serving Mass with Latin, and from the same ambience, we also learned to sing in the Gregorian chants. Why is this important? Because from an educational point of view, with speaking, pronouncing the Latin words, the A, E, I, O, U, you have to learn to open your mouth to A, E, I, O, U. And what have enriched and enhanced the use of Latin in speaking or praying at that time, just the service in the Mass, is the Gregorian chant. I will share more with the other Chinese scholars in the future, just to highlight the importance of this cross-cultural experience early on, about how the language of the Latin or the Gregorian chant in the Greek use of the singing in the Latin High Mass had lasted from the time of the Apostle Paul or Saul, from Tarsus in Asia Minor, and up to today, we are still sporadically people that prefer to go into the Latin Mass of their own, and they sing in the Gregorian chants, which you can Google all the way, the many sounds and many tunes, and how Gregorian chant literally enrich the speaking language of Latin. But we'll go on further this kind of discussion in different segments. And my life from 52 to 62, and then from 62 migrating into Brazil by way of a 45 plus days of an ocean voyage, also very enriching, leaving the port of Hong Kong into Penang, through Singapore, passing through the Malacca Strait. I was 13, 14 years old, and then going into the Indian Ocean and passing through, viewing the island of Madagascar, not landed, but we stopped at the island of Mauritius before Madagascar. And from Mauritius into one of the prettiest city I had witnessed at that time and age was the city called Lourenço Marques, which is located today in the Mozambique. Today, Lourenço Marques is called Maputo. And from Maputo, heading south to the South African cities of Port Elizabeth, then Durban, then Cape Town, and then crossing Cape Town to heading into Brazil from Indian Ocean, now onward to the South America continent. In and between this particular voyage, we make a stop. The ship made a stop to rescue 3 British scientists. They were located on the island called Tristão da Cunha, and the island was sinking, was vanishing in 1962. And from that point onward, we got into Rio de Janeiro. After Rio, we landed 2 days later into Santos in the state of São Paulo. And then we got settled in the city with the same name, São Paulo City, in the state of São Paulo. During this first 5 years, 62 to 67, 68, and where I left Brazil to come to college in the U.S. and here in the state of Wisconsin, which this is where I'm located. But it was one of the richest experience, and with the basis of Latin and Greek early on in Macau, not knowing any Portuguese, those 2 linguistic sounds had influenced totally, completely to my engagement with the Portuguese in Brazil, and also with my many great years continue on with the Salesian School of Don Bosco in a city called Lorena. Lorena is a city located exactly 250 kilometers to Rio de Janeiro, the state of Rio de Janeiro, the city named Niterói. And then from Lorena, heading to São Paulo, is exactly and precisely 250 kilometers. This again shows the brilliance, the mindsets of educators, of the visionaries, and John Bosco is known to one of the founder had created this school to accommodate all the war orphans and children in then Torino or Turin in Italy. And the John Bosco School has spread ever since every part in the world, in Africa, Asia, and I am one of the beneficiaries from their schooling and in and between Macau and Brazil. One of the subjects I have listed here about my engagement, Brazil is a phenomenal place. I have spent my 50 plus years, 45 years in the business and 5 years growing up. And my entire business is linked directly with the rich resources of Brazil in the area of gemstones, minerals, and specimen. It's a collective way when we talking about a business of 45 years involving first retail, wholesale, and global distribution, going back to Brazil directly into area of mining, all have just given me the vast network of goods and products from Brazil in the area of gemstones, minerals, and very much associated with the jewelry. From name dropping, from Harry Winston, New York, Bulgari, Tiffany, Van Cleef & Arpels, to the other area of a region in Germany, like Ida Oberstein, to the shows and fairs in Tokyo, Beijing, Hong Kong, and in Europe. You talk about Frankfurt to Zurich to Barcelona, and on and on. This 45 years of the business had continued to enrich what I had started during my master's degree level at UW Platteville, Wisconsin, the 3 C's. And I will repeat this often, the system called communication dynamics, then the cultural sphere, which is one huge factor by my travel, by the way I put together 1x1, 2x2, 3x5. Every cultural zone is carrying on with me to jump into a particular cultural zone, a linguistic zone, and out, in and out. I would explain this dynamic system later on. The last C is called the communication analytica, which I share with my students and my student counselees and non-student that had worked with me in the counseling area. And 45 years have gone by. 5 years ago, during COVID, I have decided to reestablish my cross-cultural in the area of educational psychology and counseling psychology, where the creation of another system, very simple use, called the psychology round and square. This is the combination of my learned skills during my master's, plus the living experience with the world, with the business. My business indirectly have financed my development of the psychology of round and square. And this is part of the study of psychology, the grasp of the languages, and the interest of culture and cultural anthropology. In fact, when I finished my junior high school in Brazil, junior high school in Brazil is like the ninth grade. We're 3 years for the post-junior high. I was focused, I was aiming to go into the seminary school with the Salesians. It's not so much about theology or the relation with man and God, but much more about the vast territory in the entire regions of Western Brazil, with the presence of the Salesians clergy and their work with the groups like the Chavantes in the Mato Grosso, and also today in all regions in the study of indigenous studies and research. I think the Salesians have done a fantastic job during the preservation, instead to evangelize the area, the religious aspect of the order had got into much richer engagement with the with the study of the indigenous culture and the preservation and much more. Then I will continue to elaborate more from this area. But after almost 8 months of my first engagement in the use of the system today, I'm just using this as another stepping stone to highlight that we're actually back to the era of the history of oration, oratory, speakers, maybe of the time of Homer, Iliad, and Odyssey in the Greek era. The speaker speak, be that Confucius or even Jesus, in that time frame of an era. And then the scribes will write. In the case of Confucius, Lao Tzu, and even Buddha, I suspect that for the largest part, the recording of their saying have done by their students. But today we're very fortunate. I call this era called the IT plus AI. Almost put them together by creating a new term called ITAI, ITAI, Ita in the language of the Tupi-Guarani in Brazil, meaning stone, gemstones, rocks. And I just created a registry of this term, the ITAI, Itai, pronouncing it, is to remind all of us we're involving these cross-cultural zones between information technology and combining the speedy quantum count of the artificial intelligence. So in this particular time of the cultural sphere, as I speak, we are into a very interesting era where the oral history, by what I'm doing, in the next round, if collaborating with YouTube or collaborating with any other video platforms, word by word, this speaking tones, the language can be fully registered into written letters. Once written, as you can see in many of the CC use of the multiple languages, the sound may come out differently because certain sounds, the sound system have duplicate words that have the same pronunciation but with different meaning. I saw that in the Chinese broadcasting. I see this in the other language broadcasting, Portuguese, English, and so on and so forth. And why we are talking about this particular exchange can be done in the written forms. And why? Because here's the importance. I have created one more system called the OPENBOOKS, plural. In Chinese, I just using three terms. At first, I could translate the OPENBOOKS is Kai Su OPENBOOKS. But today, I have three extra terminology adding on the logo of the OPENBOOKS. The first I use right now, I will explain others, called 学问 in Mandarin, is to learn and to question. This is, to a certain degree, is almost this kind of Socratic dialectic to extract greater knowledge in the way I use interacting with Chatgpt, also to a large extent in my use with Claude, the company, the Anthropic, right? What I found interesting is that, like everything else, we can make criticism about the AI is coming, hurting us, damaging us, and professors and teachers are worrying about students doing plagiarism or in the use of the text produced by AI. And by me, just speaking of my use of the AI, as my book, I have written on the description here that I'm writing this book called The Pedagogy of Conscience. A little bit of a daring audacity when there's a conscientization written by Paulo Freire of Brazil. And the conscience, the word I've been dealing with, learning along the way, but more accelerated because of the arrival with the AI assist programs such as Claude and ChatGPT. And let me put it this way. The way I look at it, we are all learning from one-dimensional, but with my 5 languages, plus I enjoy other non-spoken or reading French. My Latin Romance group give me Chinese. I have 4 dialects, speaking in 4, maybe in different percentage point of accuracy. But in the Romance Latin language, Spanish, Portuguese, Italian, and reading French. And I practice myself when I'm doing a Google Translate. I push the phone, the sound, so I can read the contents much easier because I have written the contents in English, translated into Portuguese, or vice versa, or Spanish, or vice versa. But when I clicked it into the French language, which I regret that I have not improved or handled better French, because at a certain age I resented my father and resented his French exposure. My father spoke impeccable French and Portuguese in all these years. And also very interesting, as of late, I put the same text and click it into the Mandarin phonetics that can help me increase of certain kind of the tonal positions of the Mandarin that was a little bit of less comfortable in the use of your tongue, literally, because my mother's language is Cantonese. So my mother tongue, even I was raised first 5 years in Shanghai with multiple languages, my mother tongue became Cantonese. And in that domain, you will have some certain kind of blockage. I don't want to say the linguistic way to put the pronunciation, but you can become articulate what your own of handicap of the pronunciation. Just like for the longest time, I grew up among with the Japanese in Brazil, and also in my business of travel. Today, the youngsters may be totally different, but in the last 20 years, the Japanese I'm engaged can never pronounce coffee because the F word sound was seldom used. They say kohi. Okay, understanding is just one thing, and we don't have to make any poking any fun about anybody speaking with an accent, because I think I do in all languages. But nevertheless, the certain kind of awakening because of the AI in 3 days. Actually, it all happened in one night. I have written 900 words in the 12 font that's coming to 300 pages, and plus editing, I can reduce that book into 200 pages or less. If I can condense even more, I will do more. It's now being edited by my wife, and we're ready to have that launch into Amazon. Imagine to launch into Amazon, I can immediately maybe have 160 languages to be translated electronically. But to put it back to the use of the open book system, I would like all this text to be electronically viable, but allowing and permitting as such insertion. Okay. Number one, this can be a very good symbiosis between publisher and myself, because people who buys the books, either this one paragraph or one chapter, or even just a couple words, they can purchase and make agreement with the discount with the system of with the open books. They can get maybe $1 a book, and look at the future learning dynamics happening here in what I have developed this last 12 months. I put it back to the before the Christmas time. And I think what I'm talking and sharing about the cross-cultural psychology, about the interpersonal relationship in the field of psychology, and when you're cross-cultural, then you have two cultural spheres or two bubbles crossing to one and the other. Give you a very simple example. I engaged tremendous amount of consulting work, business work with the Latin American nations, be it Guatemala, Salvador, Nicaragua, Chile, Peru. And in our presentations, I found it very, very humorous when my friends who can handle Portuguese-speaking Mexicans, and they came to Brazil, give their work, give their presentation, and speaking Portuguese. But after the presentation, and he or she was, oh my God, Paul, how difficult for me to speak Portuguese. And they feel a lot more comfortable going back to own language zone or linguistic area, which is very common. Yes, you can find it very comfortable to be speaking, but I found it not at all in the way I grew up with the Portuguese from Brazil in handling Spanish. And I don't find it to be difficult, but other than the fact you have the pre-notion and to do your best you can, instead of speaking, it's like coming back from Spain, speaking to my friends in Argentina, in the Uruguay, the mining groups, and say, Zaragoza or Barcelona, and they almost look like, wait, come on, Paul, are you trying to be phony and pretentious, with the Spanish zeta? But language is interesting, it's dynamic, and in what I'm about to put quite a bit of the videos onto this one major East China. I was going to use East-West. That can be, in the context and the cultural zone, a huge disconnection between the entire West and the cultural groups of Chinese. And in what I'm presenting, the way I go about open book, and to allow any one of you, after the printed text of this presentation, you can insert, of course, you can register your name, your background, you can insert to ask the clarification in this particular text, what you have omitted. Either I can respond or the team can respond. So in other words, in this dynamic form of the creation of the open books, does no longer allow any one of us to remain or to stay ignorant for long. We are all ignorant about something when we don't know. And if you ask me how to say psychology in Swahili, I have zero response. Or in Armenian, or in Arabic, or in Russian. But the dynamic side of the open book is that from any language, any text, but participating with the total sincerity to want to learn, either you want to learn that one sound, one word is meaning, that can be a full participation coming to the use of the oral language and then printed out to be in written forms. But the written form is dynamically, electronically written, where you can have your insertion. But after your insert, using the color lights to make blue, I'm enriching what you have said. I want to collaborate and make your idea richer. As just happened with my interaction with Claude writing, with Chatgpt. I'm going back to one more dynamic time of our time. Is because you and I are driving, but we never know the blind spots. That's how a car accident happened. Now you talk about with the electric cars, the vehicles coming from China, it can be automatically driving, so you can have more time to look back, look anywhere. You already have one system to enhance, to alleviate your blind spots. But how many blind spots as we're going through life? Some blind spots is also caused by our human idiosyncrasy, because our convictions, our religious value. But what I am promoting the good use of AI or AI assist text writing, storytelling. History can be reviewed reviewed by you to make modification what your blind spot was. And as I am continuing doing this, I found a tremendous amount of forensic studies of past crimes, war crimes, global war crimes, how wars got started, how flimsy wars got started, and why people starting the wars, and what had linked to the American terms spoken by Dwight Eisenhower about the military-industrial complex. Those are the negative elements about human coming to intelligence, using intelligence to only feed their one group's gain, profiteering from the wars. This is nothing new. Carpetbaggers in the time after the Civil War. But what AI assisting us is to able to remove, not removing our blind spots, but the AI is coming like a sphere board, they're rotating, in all 360-degree angles and absorbing those data. That is the benefit in the use of AI assist intelligence. And from my own development of the future global conscientological civilization, and by me embracing and making a very audacious statement about the Chinese culture is a culture of conscience. And once again, conscience cannot be taught. Conscience is a cumulative our human thinking introspectively, self-analysis. As the Greek said, an unexamined life is really not worth living. One more to enhance what we talk about conscience is Socrates. He said, I cannot teach anyone anything. All I can do to make them think. Conscience is a direct result of the layers of the cluster of small culture thinking. I think, I inspect, introspect. Let me put it very bluntly. Married couples get into fights. 90% of the time, I may have the reason to argue with my spouse. But my presentation, by my agitation, by my emotions, by the use of expletives, by manner, by the voice, tone, volume, many men end up losing the arguments because we act aggressively. But the content, we may be correct. Again, here comes the entire field about communications. And in the use of the AI assist to look back, to reflect, to analyzing, to give us a much richer view. Again, removing driving for those who drive, removing the blind spots. And that's one major clearance, because if you look at your life functioning as Chatgpt or Claude, is the way I'm using it, they are a moving sphere in a 360-degree angle in the same light channel that you have lived. But you have not been able to perceiving what the other elements are impacting your life at that time. And for the longest time, I have not been able, not that I want to, by reading more about the cross-cultural studies, who comes into my one very interesting lady from the Brown University, is Evelyn. Well, it will come to me. I will post it. That I never thought myself as a refugee since we left Shanghai in my time, so 52, into Macau and then to Brazil. And from all these times in Brazil, into the cultural zone, I was totally absorbed, curious, enormously. The language, the expression, the kisses on the cheeks, the hug, the mannerism, the protocol, from a city life living in the outskirts, no less than a mile and a half away from the downtown centro São Paulo. There's a dress code. My father wear a hat in the 40s, 50s, and then complete suit, necktie to go to the post office downtown. To go down from São Paulo to Santos to the shores, eventually to Rio, the same thing. Every building along the beach, you go to the front, not with your swimwear, you go to a side door. And then from that building, a block behind you is the commercial area where you do not go out in shorts, not even in short sleeves to a certain degree. Long sleeves is the particular norm and the protocol of the value of the cultural zone. So the more I use my cultural zone to define how I live through the changes or the adjusting to the particular custom in the area, like I go into in the midst of the Amazon, in the Rio Negro region in São Paulo de Cachoeira, you meet up with different zone of people, and you started to notice there is a certain value system. Well, maybe I'm getting too much about Brazil, but for me to going to Japan, going to sushi restaurant, what to order first, what is a certain kind of what is logical to a culture is not a logical to me. Like I take my American friends when I was in college into San Francisco into Chinese restaurants, and we have this little small dim sum dishes, absolutely delicious, called the steaming and the little barbecue, the little ribs them with the black bean sauces. Well, Jerry, my buddy, after eating all the ribs and the meat, took the sauces, the juice, and drank. And first it shocked me, but then later on come to me and said, that is probably one of the most delicious in the liquid form. Well, I start using those sauces put into my bowl of rice eventually. What I'm talking about protocol is the norm. What sometimes in my global travel, I am capable to break or to merge into a protocol and break a certain kind of protocol, to creating in a way, but not out of to be offensive, but to merge a certain kind of a culture. Case in point, people like the way I make my rice. I don't cook my rice like Chinese. I cook it with oil and garlic and onions, the way the Brazilians do. So there's one step when the rice is cooked with the flavor and with the oil, garlic or onion, you put it in the pan to do fried rice. I have reduced the time cost for the restaurants when I was in the restaurant trade before I finished my college and before I got my master's degree. Everything's about logistics for a business point of view. And then there's the cultural protocol. I think this, by me describing this crossover, the different cultural zones with the different languages, and depending on your fluency, and your fluency depending on your observation and how much you care about the culture. It's very difficult to learn a language when you have not interest of the people. This is where I found another barrier about cross-cultural learning, about linguistic learning. Sometimes language you learn by gestures. Here I am talking with my hands, because early on I'm totally influenced by the Italian priest from the day of Macau, but that was afterthought. But when I first got to Brazil, Sao Paulo, it's 80%, 70% of the city is involving with ethnic Italians. All my young lady friends I've dated all came from Italian heritage and background. And the last names, Murari, Foschini, including my wife. Maternal name is Filardo from Calabria. The point is, the certain kind of language, when you become absorbing into a culture, knowingly or not, you become partially emulating, which is good. If this hand can give you a little bit of the messages here and there, well, we all know how we use gestures to express our dislike of something, right? Vulgarity, you talk about foul language is the first language one learned, because it's much easier to express and very quick to learn and speak. Going back to this short definition of the cultural zone, but in the use of AI, in my way to use AI, in the way I'm using the procurement front and back with my, yes, a very diverse upbringing and very rich exposure to the languages and to the different sets of circumstances, such in the way when I went to Nigeria, I shared a giant snail, with my host group, with the Rotary International in Lagos, and then on to South Africa, on to the exotic cuisines in Southeast Asia, in Thailand, and the street vendors in China. Yes, you can talk about dogs, cats, snake. By me putting myself into Western European American zones and everything you go around it, ew. Maybe emulating from my young daughter's age. Everything does not look good and colorful is not edible. But whatever situation, in this description about the differences of cultures, cultural zones, cultural atmosphere, and the also different age group, how you perceive, how fast you learn, how quickly you learn, how you care to learn. That becomes the interaction of our world today. But going back to the theme, if I am in particular will spend maybe for the next 5 hours of the presentation, and I will do my best to limit each and every of my presentation in less than an hour, so you will not lose your attention. And the theme is cultural dissonance. And I have to describe historically this particular time and period that marks the entire West expansion to the world is by the impressive navigation system of the Portuguese. I will start with Columbus, 1492, also the same year as the history buff, a love of history, also the same year that makes another marking of the Inquisition in Spain, where the Islamic folks and the Jewish people predominantly in the region of Andalusia, when Spain conquered Granada, meaning the Christian kingdom of Leon and Castile, Isabella and Ferdinand had finally expediting what they have set forth 100 years ago to make sure the residents in Spain to be converted to the Roman Catholicism or to be expelled. So 1492 makes that particular era that started Christopher Columbus by him convincing the the Catholic kings and queen, Isabella and Ferdinand, and have enough funding to expedite his first voyage by heading west. He will hit India. Well, to talk about the Indios in Portuguese and Spanish, the American Indians, there's already a terminology showing the great era of the voyage created or started by Columbus. It's another controversial. In Portuguese, we say fofoca, gossip. Court history is always the registry of the court. I'm using that the paraphrase of the Chinese situation. The court history usually is having a protocol to meet to speak of good fairness of a dynasty or any one kingdom. But I like the wild history of fofoca in Portuguese means gossip. So I opened up another direction for you to look at. Christopher Columbus was never Italian. He was never from Genoa. His real name, I take in that version, is called Salvador Fernand. There are books and videos have spoken. Columbus is almost like an 007 for the king of Portugal. In fact, he was a secret agent for the Portuguese monarch to purposely take the Spanish investment and money and the voyage into the Antilles in the area of Hispaniola, today we know as Santo Domingos, and also where Haiti is located. Just give you one simple example. By him landed into the island, he named it Cuba, and the vicinity, all the islands were after some of the saints, very common in the Roman Catholic cultural groups. Columbus actually was born in a town with the same name called Cuba, in the province called Alentejo, and the Duke of Alentejo is called Beja. He is the bastard son between Beja, the duke, and the mistress happened to be a converso, which is a converted Jew. The family Zarco, his mother's name is Catalina. I hope this is correct. But his grandfather is also one of the Portuguese converso ethnic Jewish explorer who found the island of Madeira. The reason is such is the controversy of the Portuguese discovery of the island of Canarias. The name came from the ethnic group region at one time dominated by the Phoenicians. In the same island in the Canarias, in the Canary Island, they also found the same purple shell as they found in the today Lebanon in the old days called Phoenicia. Because of the dispute between the power of Spain and Portugal, the Pope had given the island of the Canarias, the Canary Islands, to Spain. But instead, to fight the Spanish, the Portuguese monarch, under the King John and the Prince Henry, the navigation school, which is so rich in the area called Sagres, southern part of Portugal, that were his base, which their voyages and discoveries had already closing into, they call Guinea, which is namely Africa. They already have settlements and discovery of the city of Lagos, which is Portuguese meaning lakes, in Nigeria, in Ghana, and almost to the tip closer to the Cape of Good Hope, but they have not been able to make the turn. The Portuguese voyagers, and directly from Ghana straight west, they had already engaged and settled in two islands. The first ones where I came to, 1962, called Tristan da Cunha, and the other one, evangelist Fernando Noronha, closer to the Brazilian shorelines. That was in 1460s. Okay. If you follow in some of my work, be that in Facebook, then I will eventually put into different domain under pauyi.ai. The Portuguese have already advancing into Africa, and had already discovered Brazil in the 1460s. But will be better articulating if you look at the treaty called Tordesillas, Tordesilla in Spanish. Tordesillas is Torsesilha. In that short time of the treaty was made, yes, by the debauchery Pope Borgia or Paul VI. In that particular treaty, Portuguese demanded 370 leagues west of the line in the middle of Atlantics, because the Pope trying to give the Portuguese the Africa continent already. Vasco da Gama, 2 years after Columbus had landed in Calcutta in India, and also in 1500, the Portuguese Cabral had discovered Brazil. If you look at the time frame of the Treaty of Tordesillas, it was just between all these three discovery, and the Portuguese rapidly, vehemently, almost on the deathbed of King John, to have the extra distance west of the Tordesillas. The Tordesillas line is almost coming down to Cabo Verde in that part of Africa. And so what I'm trying to tell my audience, whatever you read, whatever you study, have a little fun, to become gossipy, to take a different look of the events, how true and how real, okay? And this coming back down to the same purpose when we look at history. Is it what it is? Is it what is being said? But when you have questions and doubt, then you will expand your horizon to learn more about what we see today, what we have missing in history. And this missing in history is, I have found, the greatest Chinese and the Western cultural group and their gaps, which is a cultural dissonance, a total cultural disconnect. Here comes the issue. Why using Columbus to start the global expansion by the Iberians from the Columbus to the Portuguese to Africa to India, China, and to have captured Brazil, is the Portuguese expansion. But the Spanish eventually also having a much larger territory or compatible to the Portuguese ocean land grab of Brazil in Africa, in India, and also into the Asia. The Spanish group, by the last of the explorer, West known him as Magellan, but he's also another Portuguese, also coming up the school of the Portuguese navigation school of the Prince Henry, is Fernando Magalhães, another Portuguese explorer employed by the Spanish, continue the system of the coastal navigation going down south to Argentina and found a passage which became the Strait of Magellan, got into the ocean, he named it Pacific Ocean. And from the Pacific Ocean, his other landing into present-day Guam used to know to be Isla de los Ladrones, the islands of the thieves. And from the island of the thieves, he landed into the group of archipelago in the island called Cebu today, and he was killed in the Cebu, which is the islands of the Philippines. And at that time in point, they named the island of the King Prince Felipe, and Felipe become Las Islas Filipinas or Filipinas. And Philip II become the king, better known by his defeat of his armada fighting Queen Elizabeth when he was trying to join forces with the Catholic queen from Scotland, Mary, Queen of Scots. Now, I put this event together is to let you all have a little understanding. After the Iberian, Portuguese, Spanish, in the world conquest, here comes the Brits. Here comes the pirates, Henry Morgan, robbing the Spanish and the Caribbeans. Why do they rob the Spanish Caribbeans? Because there's another secret silver route. When the Spanish Empire, including Peru, Bolivia was not even in the map. It wasn't the map, but under Peru. And from the Peruvian zone, they found the biggest silver mine in Potosi, Bolivia. And that is the silver that navigating from Bolivia or by land or by sea, taken to the port of Acapulco. And from Acapulco, they went westwards to Las Filipinas, the Spanish Empire in the Pacific, and where the silver was trading with the Chinese merchants in the islands of Philippines, in the city of Manila. And all this voyage of the ships from Acapulco to the Philippines become known a part of history called the Manila Galleons. The galleons weigh a couple of tons, housing 500 passengers, 200 member in crews, traveling 6 months to 4 months from Manila, depending on the wind, into Acapulco and back. And then on land from Acapulco, go to Veracruz in Mesoamerica and Havana, and transporting a very secretive trade with the Chinese. Secretive is because very few had known about the silver. Heading into Mexico, the Spanish New Spain into Manila for trade, and then 30% of the silver heading from Nueva España, the New Spain, the territory, Mexico. Remember, at that particular empire, their land mass involving all the way up north to the Oregon state of the United States. And so the trade route was quite secretive until the exposure of these galleons from the Caribbeans heading back to Spain that were captured by the British pirates. What's very funny, even such a kingdom, the huge empire eventually of the British, starting with pirates like Francis Drake, robbing the Spanish galleons and getting reward and awarded to the knighthood to service to the Queen. And then the two evolution of the British Empire exhausting their drinking of tea, and such teaching the British how to drink tea, have table manner, also started by another Portuguese noble, Catarina de Bragança, married to the king, and the tea habit become a vice, and become from this vice, the British have exhausted their silver in their purchase of tea from China. But so remember the two spheres, from the England Africa route, the Portuguese route to India, to the spicy islands of the archipelago around the Indonesia and the Philippines, and then to China, and then the Spanish have another broad-based, I call it the Pacific Silk Road, by the Chinese and the group of ethnic Chinese with origin from Fujian, speaking their local language of Mainland, and their influence of the Kingdom of Spain in the Philippines, in Manila, and then the galleon trade to Mexico, and Mexico eventually into Spain. This expansion by time and era, and by the time of the British, when the British had found their industrial revolution, had developed steam engine, and with the steam engine, with the gunpowder, the gunboat, had eventually conquered China in the use of opium as the drug, as another vice, no less than the British had their vice, exhausting the silver from then the tea habit, tea drinking. I make this history events much broader just to emphasize one thing. What am I talking about? The cultural dissonance, cultural disconnect between the West and the East. Here comes in a very brief term. The West had forever expanding. After the British come the Americans, the Opium War, 1840s, the dominance of the British power into the Asian. And also remember, until 1800s, before that, the two richest empires, with the reversal, backdating the GNP between India and China, they were the number one and number two global empire, and also by wealth. Big data today, AI today, we can backdating the events, and eventually calculating all the silver payoff in all the inequality treaty to the West, how much China and how much India have paid off to these European invaders, conquerors, dominators, and extractors of the natural resources of Asia, Africa, and also in the Americas. From this perspective, I just want to highlight one part, that with all the conquest, seizure, capture from slavery, from natural resources, they dominated by gunpowder, they dominated by weapon, they dominated by the speedy shipped engine and with the use of engines and technology. And that evolution further expanded to the next industrial revolution in the Americas, in the US in particular, during the time called the robber barons, as one period highlighting of be that of the petroleum, the rail system, the railroad in the US, and also with the other inventions such as electricity, eventually automobile, and all this industrial revolution from England to the US, with the extra US expansion by opening the CIA intelligence of the internet. Then we have now the IT industrial evolution expanding over into the current moment of the global use AI in this particular domain is no longer limited to the physical gears, such as from the electricity, from all the other mechanistic usages, to now a global intellectual in the area of cognition, the thinking man. The movement of the speedy quantum algorithm and all the other trinkets and gears are no longer limited physically into one terrain, not the British ships, not even the American hegemony. Because unless somebody can weaponize AI to give any nation a dominant role to play the past destructive power game, we are now almost into an equilibrium of the usage of the human technologies. But my point is, along with all this expansion of the military expansion, territorial expansion, what I had not mentioned by just looking at the 1900 early 1900s or the Bolshevik Revolution, I did an analysis about the global territorial domains, thinking about the four big nations. Russia, United Kingdom had almost conquered 24% of the land nations in the world. Russia had gone all the way from Moscow, from St. Petersburg, all the way to the east side of the Siberia, and taken many land by also some of the intermarriage between the Russians and the Mongols, feeling their legitimacy to take part of the Outer Mongolia out of the hands of the Chinese by the time when China had formed in 1948, and literally from the Qing's expansion into the area north of Xinjiang, that part of Mongolia, the Russian felt justified to have taken part of that landmass into the Tsar Russia period. England at that time also had part of Canada, that making US much smaller, or even smaller than the present size of China. So we talk about Russian territorial size, the British global under the Union Jack size, the Americas, and to compare all this landmass, once again showing the military, political, territorial gains of the forces. And come next, what comes with the American, the Columbus venture into the Americas is always carrying with him of that upside down of the sword is the cross. Because all the voyages of the Portuguese colonization were in part funded by the converted Jews, is one of the way to exile out of the Roman Catholic Spain or Portugal. In fact, Portugal is far more tolerant. And also in all this negotiation, the Vatican always have a partake, a percentage point that rewarding to the Holy See. And in most of these voyages, also the literacy of all the travel historians, documentation, accounting, in part or in whole, was shared or assigned to the Roman Catholic clergies because they had missionary on board, and the literacy of the entire Europe, as we're all witnessing, the Catholic and the split with the Protestants by Martin Luther, were in the hands of the Roman Catholic clergy. And because of such event, I add to one more element the broad cross-cultural mindset, Europe just suffered in the 1200 of the Black Death. 1/3 of the European population get vanished. But on that, they bring on some positive, the forming and shaping in the city-states. The feudal people, the rural people come into the city looking for work, and also they had advanced the urbanization, the education, the cultural, I don't call it enrichment, the culture shift into the industrial base of Europe. And with that, the Roman Catholic had moved on with the Black Death, the fear of the death, the fear of the second coming of Christ. Life is going to be terminated very soon, besides the Black Death. So their zealotry, their vehemence to promote, to want to have missions, to converting many of these lost souls of the indigenous people in Americas, in Asia, in India, eventually China, Korea, Japan, so on and so forth. And that particular zealotry had done nothing, never have given them the time of reflection if there could be another group of cultural people that can be more sophisticated, more civilized, more cultured than them. This similar ideas of the conquerors, of the barbarians, had they ever existed, from the Vikings, even to the Roman themselves, who had conquered the river valleys of Niles and the grains from Egypt, they had never given any thoughtfulness about the culture of the Egyptians, or until the time of Napoleon, when he commissioned his the anthropologists and archaeologists into the study of the Egyptian culture. And so one by one, the civilization of Egypt, the civilization of Mesopotamia, and including the Hindu Valley, which I'm not sure that was destroyed by the arrival of the Aryans from the plain area between Iran and the region of northwest of India. However, the people that come in, that conquer, that took what they think they can take from a country they suppress, oppress, and dominated, have never given thoughts about their cultural composition. And this is why I'm coming to this point to speak of. First, it was not easy to define conscience. Conscience is not a mechanism. Conscience is not a methodology. Conscience is all about the fine-tuning of the human thinking involving reflection, introspection, self-analysis, and group analysis. And this is where the problem we have facing today, very openly, the discrepancy about how the Americans look into the Chinese. Because so far, because the missionaries and the Europeans, their first contact to the other cultures in India, in China, Korea, Japan, in whatsoever landscape, they do not have a language to understand what is the other side of the culture. And because the 4 branches of the Abrahamic group, Judaism, Catholicism, Protestantism, Islamism, is all coming under the collective influence of this Judeo-Abrahamic culture. So they cannot see the monotheistic sets of value had never granted these people to have the vocabulary and to see or to redefine the Greek terms, what is conscience? But on the contrary, in the Chinese formation of the value system by the 3 main school of thoughts, by Confucius, by Lao Tzu, Tao, and by the Indian influence, Buddha, their teaching and their educational orientation of conscience by all this European, the whole group, be the conquerors, scholars, academicians, religious, They put all behind the Confucius study into Confucianism, Taoism, Buddhism. What I'm sharing here to the audience is never about any accusation. A very simple phrase. Ignorance is not a sin. Ignorance is not a crime. Even they have committed criminal acts, but by not knowing, it's not a crime nor a sin. But by today, if we know the Chinese system is a culture that derives from good thinking, and the Chinese competency today in and around the world is coming out of a conscientological efficiency, and also another word, conscientologically competency. It is time for the world to rethink, reflect, and be introspect. By not knowing conscience-driven Chinese culture, I'm making a very audacious statement by calling the entire Chinese system is all about education and learning about human conscience. And I will stop here, and I will looking forward to the next broadcast. Maybe I would try to do it on a daily basis, but while I'm sharing, I'm also learning, acquiring the better words to define conscience, conscientology. But I was first inspired just by one man, one word, the conscientization of Paulo Freire from Brazil. He is one of the first Western scholars, philosophers, teacher, thinker, who had used the term to have conscience, advocating conscience education, advocating conscience understanding, conscience awareness. And I hope this is just the beginning. Otherwise, the projection, the Freudian projection in the American use of the hegemony system of Monroe Doctrine, zero-sum game, the American exceptionalism, and with other new terms, we are projecting what China is to become the projection of a future enemy of our own features of aggression, of dominance. I hope this is the beginning of a new era, and why I'm trying to produce the book, and I'm trying to influence aligning my Brazilian teachers and scholars to become having a great awareness of the understanding of human conscience. Thank you for your time. Pronto, Gustavo?
Foi bem, hein?
Não, pô, agora eu tenho como chama? Um termo, né? Um fim, né?
É,
Um tópico, né? Agora eu posso falar mais.
é verdade.
Eu vou fazer xixi, meu amigo.
Tá bom,
Tá. Volto já.
tá bom. Renato.